Iverson is currently injured with a hamstring injury. So I am feeling pretty confident that this could be a bounce back game for Brock Purdy. Do you anticipate that the Vikings are going to try to play man coverage? Do you think that they're going to give Brock Purdy any trouble? Or do you think that this will be, the 49ers might have had their wake up call and could go into this game feeling pretty good?
When you talk about the Minnesota Vikings, I honestly think their defense has improved from last year. Last year, their defense was horrendous. They just won a ton of one-score games, especially against the run. Their defense was pretty bad. They're like average this year, somewhere around their average, and that's what their record indicates as well. To me, when I look at their defense, the number one thing that stands out is the pressure. I mean, the blitz rate. Brian Flores, who's their defensive coordinator, he's been a huge blitz guy, even dating back to his Miami days, and he blitzes at a high rate. I believe it's above 50,
20%.
somewhere, 20% on third downs, which is, or he has cover zero blitzes on 20% of third downs, which is insane. The cover zero blitz is where you send everybody and it's just one-on-one coverage across the board. Mm-hmm. And so, he blitzes at a high rate. And so you might expect, different stunts, different pressures from the Minnesota Vikings in order to try and protect their secondary. But the 49ers, their operative is to get the ball out quick, try and, get these quick slants going, try and get these quick passes out in space over the middle of the field. And that's where I think they're going to try and operate and try and set Brock Purdy up with some easier throws as he, acclimates himself back. I think this is a game where you can set Brock Purdy up with some easier throws. And, of course, it'll be dependent on the personnel you have out on the field. We don't know if Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams will be out there. But I do think this is a game where you can set Brock Purdy up with some easier throws and things like that. That Minnesota Vikings defense, it's all right. I don't think it's bad necessarily, but they lost, a good run stuffer in Dalvin Tomlinson. No Zadarius Smith there anymore. They're missing a couple of pieces on that defensive line, which has forced them to amp up the pressure a little more alongside Danielle Hunter.
Really quick with you were talking about, my brain just blanked, so sorry. Hold on, I'm gonna answer some comments really quick. I saw a guy say missing field goals, come on. I don't think that I'm personally definitely concerned about Jake Moody coming up. How are you feeling about Jake Moody? I think I'm not super concerned about him in the Vikings game, but much like how I feel like we might have learned something about Brock Purdy's ability to face man coverage, I am kind of concerned about Jake Moody's ability to handle pressure. I think it was on not Niners Nation, but the new channel that Rob Stats Guerrera has. Levin Black was pointing out something, and it's that Jake Moody in college had a really good record of making, I think it was like almost all of his kicks at home, but on the road he really struggled. He made like 60 something percent of his kicks on the road. And if you think about road environments in college, they're way more mentally tough because people are in the stands, instead of cheering for you to make the field goal, they're trying to make you miss. A lot more pressure in those games. So I'm kind of concerned with Jake Moody when it comes to his ability to handle pressure. I know that the 49ers, when they were scouting him, said that they kind of assimilated pressure, but I don't think you can really assimilate pressure well. If I think about myself and I'm maybe doing something and I'm like, okay, if something goes wrong, this is how I'm going to handle it, and I kind of feel confident in my ability to do that. But you don't actually know how you're going to handle the situation until you're in the situation. So I kind of feel like maybe the 49ers should have looked more at like how he actually handled pressurized games, which he did not do well in games with like I said, on the road he had a much worse percentage of field goals and extra points made. So I'm kind of concerned about concerned about Jake Moody in high stakes games going forward, which is a bit disappointing because I think even though he was brought in to be a younger, cheaper version of Robbie Gould and has a stronger leg, we know that Robbie Gould was at least consistent in those high pressure moments. And for a Super Bowl caliber team, to me, that's what's most important. I don't think that the Niners would have a ton of problems maybe getting closer to field goal or like closer. But yeah, I think in those gotta have it moments, you need to be able to have a reliable guy that's not in his head. So I'm hoping that he's not in his head. I know after the game he said his teammates and stuff were really supportive. Uh, Fred Warner came out and said it wasn't his fault. We made a lot of mistakes. But then on the Fred Warner podcast, which I didn't listen to all of, but listened to like literally 5 minutes of, but his wife was going in on Jake Moody. She was like, it was very fan. She was
Dang.
like, she was like,
Okay.
yeah, you guys made mistakes, but you guys came back at the very end. You put yourself in a position to win, and he made like she was like, and I was like, can you imagine being Jake Moody and your teammate like who's over there being like, we got your back, and then his wife is just like, I was so mad, like she was heated. That was kind of crazy. How do you feel about Jake Moody in these high pressure? You know what I mean? We're in Philadelphia, gotta have it field goal. How do you feel like he makes that?
I mean, like I said about Brock Purdy, with a guy who made his first 9 field goals of the year, you give him the benefit of the doubt, correct? But the issue with Jake Moody, and the reason why I have a lot more concern for him than I do for Brock Purdy, is because of the margin of error at the positions. At quarterback, there's margin for error, and there's room for growth, and there's room for development. At kicker, there is not room for development. There's not margin for error because you can't just allow, a kicker to develop. If you allow a kicker to develop and allow him to go through and miss some field, go through his growing pains, well, you're costing yourself a couple of games. The 49ers have now lost already one game due to their kicking woes. And he's not the only reason they lost. He's not maybe even the primary reason they lost. They should have easily won this game. But he is, at the end of the day, they put the game in his hands and he didn't convert. And it was a relatively easy field goal. He missed 2 on the day overall. And at the kicker position, this is one where you can't afford mistakes because the difference between this is the analogy I always use, the difference between, the 1 seed and the 2 seed, or the 2 seed and a wild card team, which gives you, an extra home game in the playoffs, is 1 or 2 games. And right now the 49ers are 1 game down, and you can't afford to lose more games due to kicking woes. Luckily, Moody hasn't been in a place in a high leverage situation before this game to where the 49ers had to rely on that. But it's unfortunate that the first high leverage situation that he faces, he missed. And so you do wonder what it does to a man's confidence, especially at that position. And you do wonder how much that impacts head coach Kyle Shanahan and the way that he operates offensively on 4th downs in the
I
red
wonder
zone
if
or
he'll
in
be
that
more
territory.
aggressive.
Yeah. Are you
It
more
could be
aggressive?
good. It
I
could be
mean,
good
it
for
could
him to
be, but
be.
that's also showing a lack of confidence in your kicker. And so,
Oh, that's true. And then
overall,
that maybe gets in his head more. Oh, so it's like
overall, you
a.
got to think about it in a lot of ways. And this isn't a situation the 49ers should have been in. And unfortunately for Moody, the talk about not only drafting him in the 3rd round, but going with a rookie kicker over, a veteran kicker who's done it before, as other teams have done, that's going to carry with him. And the 49ers had a lot of opportunities to upgrade their roster in the 3rd round and instead chose to make a kicker selection. Again, like I said, benefit of the doubt is there, but at a much lower margin than you do at quarterback, given the importance of kicker and you need him to win now.
I completely agree. In the 3rd round they could have drafted an offensive lineman, and currently we're going to get to it in a little bit. But currently Trent Williams and Aaron Banks didn't practice yesterday, so you would really hope that they would have maybe fortified that position more instead of getting a kicker. But we're not going to go back to draft night now. I did remember when my brain blanked earlier what I was talking about. We were talking about the blitz and Brock Purdy, and that Brian Flores blitzes at a super high rate compared to the rest of the league. And my brain at first kind of went to the Giants game where Brock Purdy was blitzed, I think like 80 something percent of the time. They just sent the blitz the whole time. Even his first game in the NFL against Miami, they also blitzed him a ton. And he actually has performed really well against the blitz. Now, the only issue is, I think a big reason he's performed really well is against the blitz, you have to get the ball out really quick. And he has checked it down to Christian McCaffrey over and over again in those situations. And Christian McCaffrey has been able to turn, a 1 yard dump off into 5, 6, 8 yards. So uh, do you think that Brian Flores will keep with his strategy to blitz Purdy a lot? And how do you think maybe Kyle Shanahan, are you anticipating Debo playing? Are you anticipating him getting Kittle involved? I know that they kind of did that against Dallas for some dump off passes. Who, if Christian McCaffrey has to sit, which we don't know if he will yet or not. The 49ers are being kind of coy with that right now, but he didn't practice. So just for a hypothetical game, if Christian McCaffrey is out, do you think that that blitz is going to be more concerning for Brock Purdy than it would have been?
Yeah, I do think that when you look at what Minnesota will do, I absolutely think they got to blitz because the way to create some disruption is trying to get pressure on him, right? Try and put him in those unfavorable situations, and I mean the blitz is going to be that way because outside of Neil Hunter, you wonder how Minnesota is going to get there in terms of their sack rate. I mean they have a solid sack rate; they're 13th in the NFL, around 8%. Daniel Hunter is the primary guy there, and he's going to have a good matchup if he's lined up, on that side against Colt McKivitz, even if he's lined up against a hobble Trent Williams, it's going to be a fun matchup to watch. But I do think that, they're going to try and create more one-on-one opportunities for him. And the way to do that is sending more rushers so that San Francisco has to deal with more players. It also tries to help out their guys on the back end in that, if you get home, you don't have to cover, you don't have to be in coverage for that long. And so that's something that I think they'll definitely try and do. Interested to see what Brock Purdy's response to it is, but in general, Brock Purdy has shown that he can overcome the blitz at times. You look at week 3 when he was blitzed 85, 86% of the time. I mean, his confidence never wavered, and he was able to win that game pretty handedly, 30-12. Numbers didn't look great, and at times it was shaking the first quarter. But overall, I thought his response was pretty impressive, and that's what you're going to try and look for again. I mean, you're going to try and see a good response here from Purdy because that's probably what you're going to expect.
I agree, and I think with the week, there's a difference in adjusting to injury during game versus having a whole week to prepare. So even though Kyle Shanahan is going to be coy with the media because he obviously wants the Vikings to prepare for Christian McCaffrey because that's going to take a ton of defensive time, he will know, and the team will know whether or not Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Trent Williams, all these players are going, and they will have plenty of time to scheme, other guys wide open. I would hope that they would get George Kittle more involved if a guy like Christian McCaffrey wasn't playing because I think that they need to get their yak guys more involved against the blitz. Obviously, stretch them down the field, get some deep throws to Ayuk every once in a while to make sure that they're not like that they make sure that they're defending the entire field. But I think with that high blitz percentage, that it would be very smart of them to kind of utilize these yak guys that don't always go off. And it's kind of hilarious that George Kittle can have 3 touchdowns one game and then not even 3 targets the next game. But Monday Night Football, I do always feel like George Kittle has pretty big games in prime time. I don't know if that's real or just I feel like he stands out more in those games. I think he's kind of a performer. He really likes he has a big personality, so I think he tries to get the ball more in those situations. Now, depending on how the Aaron Banks, Trent Williams, those injuries are, I don't know if Kyle will have him in to block more, but I am going to be interested to see. We everyone calls Kyle a genius, and I have a ton of respect for him. So I think that the game plan will be a lot better this coming week than it was in game. And I was disappointed in his in game adjustments last week. How do you feel about Kyle and maybe the guys who might step up um, for any injured guys coming into this Vikings game?
When you're saying the in-game adjustments, are you saying Kyle himself or who? Are you saying a player?
Yeah, I felt like Kyle didn't get like he didn't utilize Kittle. He didn't get any touches. I know that they tried to have I think Ray take over for that Debo role because in the beginning we saw Debo get immediate handoff
Injury?
and
Yeah.
pass, and then he got injured, and then right after that Ray was in. Now Ray there was a play where it was wide open for a touchdown, and instead of going the way he should have gone, Ray ran straight into Trent Williams. Um, and then I think I was seeing on Twitter, I think he made comments after the game that he was not prepared as much as he should have been, which I found kind of interesting because then Kyle Juszczyk went on the Richard Sherman podcast and talked about how Kyle Shanahan has told his players that because he's so busy being a head coach and a play caller, that he is really grateful that he has this veteran team because he doesn't feel like he needs to get on them as much. But in hindsight, maybe he should be getting on some of these at least backups and making sure that they are prepared and maybe the starters are doing everything they need to do every week. But it did seem it seemed like when you looked at Jordan Mason in his pass protection and kind of basically anytime he wasn't running the ball, he looked confused. And Ray they stopped utilizing him after he made multiple mistakes when they tried to first switch to him. Now, I do have confidence that this week, if those guys are out, that the backups are definitely preparing, because once you get embarrassed like that, I feel like it wakes you up and you're like, oh, I never can let that happen again. But yeah, what did you think about? Did you hear Kyle Shanahan or Kyle Juszczyk make those comments from Kyle Shanahan? And what do you think about his trust that he has in these players to kind of maybe regulate themselves? And do you think maybe this game made him feel like he has to step in more?
Yeah, I mean, I heard Shanahan's comments, did not hear use checks, but Shanahan essentially said after the game how he's going to trust his players, but he's also going to trust the trainers, and that was the case with Trent Williams. Williams battled through a lot of pain, he said after the game, but he didn't want to put the team or he didn't want to put backup Jalen Moore into that position. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why he played. Overall, in the adjustment period for Shanahan, I mean, I think the main gripe with me for Shanahan was one series of play call. Well, there were two different things, but the primary thing was the second to last series where the 49ers had the ball up one with over 3 minutes left. Thought you could have gotten, a first down there running the football, trying to burn the clock because, I mean, the passing game was struggling. And so I thought with a guy like Jordan Mason, I understand, he hasn't seen as many carries. He only saw 5 in the game, but he's a guy who they've tabbed as a closer in the past. And I thought, if he gets some carries there, you try and get a first down, you're able to run the clock down, you're able to win this game. Unfortunately, they only took 16 seconds off the clock. And and then Kyle Shanahan ends up punting. I mean, regardless, it doesn't matter because they got the ball back and they were able to put themselves in field goal position. They ultimately did not miss, but I didn't mind necessarily Kyle Shanahan's adjustments. The reason that I said that they say that is because I thought this game was winnable, regardless with the way that with the way things were game planned, the way things were schemed. There were open receivers all day long. It's just unfortunately a matter of accuracy in this game with Brock Purdy. You talk about the Christian McCaffrey miss deep downfield. You talk about the interception where Ayuk was open on that play. You talk about even the Ayuk drop, right? That could have been a touchdown. There are several plays in this game that could have ultimately changed the outcome of this game that you don't expect the 49ers to generally miss. And that's why I don't blame Kyle Shanahan as much, because I thought there was a chance you could have put even 30 points on the number one defense who only allows 15 points a game. I thought there was a chance you could put 30 points. If you're putting that many points on a defense of this caliber, I think you should be able to win. You're going to be able to win this game. And so that's where I think I'm more disappointed. I think it was more of an executional mishap this week. But again, the other part is the injuries. I mean, this is why I thought this game was very important for Brock Purdy. This was his first test, really. Can you carry the team on your shoulders? You don't have Christian McCaffrey. You don't have Deebo Samuel. You still have ample amount of, you still have Brandon Ayuk. You still have George Kittle. You still have an ample amount of guys that you can that are around you. But could you carry this team? And unfortunately, the answer was no. In this game, that was the case. We're going to see how he bounces back on Monday. Against the Minnesota Vikings, and he's definitely going to get some opportunities in close games where he's going to be asked to, carry the load again. But in this week, I thought that answer was no.
I agree. And the thing is, even if Debo and Christian McCaffrey sit out, if you compare the offensive weapons on the 49ers, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, even with how well, I know he messes up in pass production sometimes, but Jordan Mason is running the ball. Elijah Mitchell, since he's healthy, usually does well when given a good amount of carries and is able to get into rhythm. I still think they have better offensive weapons than the Vikings starting offensive weapons without Justin Jefferson. So I feel pretty confident that the 49ers and that that Brock Purdy will be able to bounce back and that Kyle Shanahan will be able to scheme guys open to kind of react to that pressure.